So I want to take a moment to talk about the film Everything Everywhere All at Once that just came out this year. And this is a film that I think a lot of people have sort of had the discussion, is it overrated? Did it really deserve all those Oscars? And while some people might say no, I definitely think it did, and I hope to explain why in a few minutes here. Um, so the Daniels were a really interesting directing team, and I think the people who had trouble with this film should probably never watch Swiss Army Man because that movie is even, more Looney Tunes and more out there. But I think what really comes through with both these films is just how sort of good-hearted they are. The essential lesson for both films really is about empathy and kind of trying to understand another person or other people. So something that had kind of prevented me from talking about this film is just like wanting to do it justice. I had hoped to kind of do a video ahead of the Oscars. It was a big contender and obviously it had a huge night. People might say that there are other films that might have deserved some of the different Oscars. I might even agree that Stephanie Hsu probably deserved the supporting Oscar over Jamie Lee Curtis, but in any case, they're all on the same team really. And I wish I had a little googly eye so I could do that whole thing. But this is a film that starts very small. We're just following Michelle Yeoh and her husband, played by Kei Kwan, who of course famously played Short Round and also was in The Goonies, and then apparently was kind of not exactly blacklisted, but just wasn't given very many options in Hollywood to kind of continue acting. And I thought that's a real shame because he's a really charismatic, interesting performer, and I hope I guess Disney controls the rights to Indiana Jones right now, but I hope they take a cue from this and really consider Harrison Ford isn't going to continue as Indiana Jones, so maybe they just do a Short Round series or a TV show or something like that. Um, so all these creatives are really heavily involved in this movie, and you can clearly see how Michelle Yeoh, the Daniels really wrote this part for her. It's basically, various different characters she's played, various different guises she's held. Um, just to go into the story itself, for any who haven't seen it, and if you haven't seen it, definitely do that. I will probably address spoilers, although I don't think that really matters that much for this movie. But essentially, you have a plot where this housewife is sort of unsatisfied with her life. You also see that her husband is considering divorcing from her, and she's having a lot of problems with her daughter, who happens to be a lesbian. Something that she doesn't want to talk about with her father. It's kind of nice that she herself doesn't really seem to care that much, but it's her father that's the problem. She doesn't want to, I guess, embarrass their legacy or something like that. It's probably a common problem that a lot of people have. So that's the basic setup for this. Then, in the middle of all that, they're also having the IRS audit their finances of the laundromat, for a lot of spurious entries, I guess. So we have a very comedic scene where they're in the offices of the IRS talking to Jamie Lee Curtis and kind of explaining their situation. And that's when you suddenly get this hard sci-fi twist where you have another version of K-Kwan sort of appear and explain that Michelle Yeoh's character has to basically go on this journey, this adventure with him to restore the universe and to prevent it from being destroyed. One thing that I really appreciate about this movie and think it's really clever about it is it mostly is just set in this office building. They don't really travel outside the confines of it, but they do, travel to other dimensions. So essentially, you kind of learn that it's almost like the One or the Matrix, where you can hop between different dimensions and sort of, pick up different skills from the other versions of you. And there's a very funny scene near the beginning where basically we find out that Michelle Yeoh hasn't really been affected by this yet because she's like kind of the least remarkable, kind of the version that no one would notice or think about. Every disappointment she's had, I think Kwan says at some point, has led her to this point. So essentially, she's selected because she is maybe the only one who still has a chance of fighting whoever this big enemy is. And then you find out very quickly that it's actually Stephanie Hsu, who has gone through the same exact experience in another universe and has sort of unlocked her full potential in a way. She is kind of like Jet Li in The One, where she just has every single ability of every version of her, hence the title Everything Everywhere All at Once. She just experiencing it all at the same time, and kind of can blip through every dimension and do basically just rewrite reality however she wants it to be. So a big part of this film is the action. It's really well choreographed, very clear. Not a lot of quick cutting. Obviously, both the two leads in this movie are experienced and also choreographers in their own rights. Um, so they're not afraid to do all the stunt work and really just bring the action to the forefront and just let it sort of play out. Kei Kwan gets this amazing moment very early in the movie where he kind of takes out a bunch of guards just using a fanny pack and some pebbles from like a fishbowl. There are also moments where the film slows down and you kind of get some more exposition. They're kind of building up the big bad. I think Stephanie Sue really stole the show as the daughter. She gives a very touching and memorable performance as just the regular daughter, but then she's, actually really menacing and scary in how insane she is. Or maybe insane's not the right word, but, how out there she is as this big bad. Her villainous plot has to do with a bagel, the bagel with everything on it, the everything bagel, or whatever it's called, which is like almost like a black hole of nihilism in some such sort of way. This film itself is basically like about existentialism and about nihilism. Why do we do anything? Why bother? What's the point? And this movie kind of makes the case that even if there is no purpose to anything, we can kind of make our own purpose and kind of, feel that knowledge that we might exist in other timelines having made other choices. But even so, you can sort of just like be satisfied with the one you're on. It's also just about empathy. I think the big takeaway of this movie is, as Michelle Yeoh keeps leveling up and understanding more about how to use her powers and her new abilities, she kind of realizes that just being like the action movie heroine isn't going to really work. It's not going to fix the problems that everyone's facing. So there's this tremendous scene towards the end where she's kind of every enemy who's kind of attacking her, taken over by this everything bagel power. She just reaches into their past, figures out what the thing is that they're lacking, and then gives it to them, and it makes them not want to fight her anymore. You also get James Hong as the father, and he's really good too, at just being sort of grumpy and also menacing when he needs to be as well. This is a movie that's almost completely family friendly, except there are a few sort of sexual innuendos that maybe don't let it be all that friendly, particularly involving a fight with a dildo, and then there's like this big sequence with a butt plug that I won't really spoil here. But essentially, I think the heart of the movie is very pure. And essentially we have this conceit where to get from one reality to the other one, where you need to like get a power or get a memory or whatever you need, you have to do something unexpected that will take you away from this reality. Like Kei Kwan demonstrates it early on when he takes out a tube of lip balm and just like eats it, and that helps him get his fighting ability. So we have a really built-in clever way of having a lot of like comedic little set pieces of people just doing like ridiculous things to kind of get to another universe. We also have the built-in conceit that as we travel to these different universes, we learn more about Michelle Yeoh and about the worlds she inhabits. So of course, in one of the worlds, it's straight up a parody of Ratatouille. I think it's Rakakuni in that one, where she's working with this other chef who's kind of like trying to take just take a claim away from her, and she eventually takes off his chef hat to reveal that he has a little raccoon that's controlling him, and then that raccoon gets taken away. In another universe, people have sausages for fingers, and again, it doesn't really help to sort of explain all these things away, because it really is just watching the film. That's the best way to understand it. But so she's in a relationship with Jamie Lee Curtis, and the way they express sentiment is by manipulating their sausage fingers in gross ways. So just like really absurdist humor. Eventually, they end up in a universe where there was no life, everything that led to life, starting on our world never happened. So instead, they're just rocks, kind of observing the world. And it kind of builds to this point, almost like a Star Wars film, where there's like a bunch of cascading conclusions to each of these different worlds. You have that little dip where you're like, oh no, it's the worst thing that's happening in each universe, and then they go back up, and we see how they resolve the different issues that everyone's having. And then, of course, Kei Kwan, I think, really steals the show, not only as an action star, but, just the empathy and the portrayal of sort of like a sensitive man. You basically realize that it's because he's not this like really aggressive, alpha male, just like big buff action star. That's not the thing that helps him get to the end. The thing that helps him get to the end is realizing that they do need each other. They do mean something to each other. We get another universe where Michelle Yo is just a movie star like she is in real life. And then we sort of find K-Kwan is there as well, and he's like almost like a slick. I forget the director, but it's this really famous Japanese director who does these really slick films, and he's kind of like inhabiting that kind of vibe. And you see that even though they're both very successful in their own way, they kind of have all these regrets of not just having this simple life of being married and operating a laundromat. So yeah, there's a lot of convolution, a lot of like sci-fi stuff. I don't think that stuff really matters because at the heart of it, it is just like a family movie, and it's about these character connections, and that's the really important part that you sort of take away from the movie. Um, so yeah, it just builds to a very natural conclusion. It's very organic. Again, the acting is stellar throughout. I really think the acting Oscars were well warranted, especially from K. Kwan Huan. I feel like I'm saying that name wrong. Look, K. Hugh Kwan. So you just get this really empathetic portrayal and like this feeling that like the reason that they're succeeding has nothing to do with their acumen and their abilities and all that stuff, but just has to do with making that heart connection and sort of subverting this nihilism. This is the antidote to nihilism in a way. And something that we can really take away and sort of think about in our own lives, how we sort of like, zombie walk through the world versus how we can make these genuine connections and sort of uplift humanity as a whole by, sort of connecting with people and building, relationships and, not having that grass is greener FOMO sort of thing about like, what if I'd done this thing? What if I'd done that thing? What's going on in this other universe if I had ended up with this person or not been with this person or had a kid or not had a kid? You can kind of just put that behind you and be like, okay, probably everything is happening in the universe, in different dimensions, but it doesn't matter because you just have to worry about like what's in front of you right now, the connections you make with the people around you right now, and really driving that point home. And I think what's really remarkable about this film also is it's definitely a COVID baby sort of thing. Like it was made during COVID. So the effects team, I think, did a really great job, despite the fact that they weren't, working in a typical sort of stream. So, just the fact that they're able to come up with these memorable visuals and these really interesting ways of depicting traveling through different dimensions, how they actually show Michelle Yeoh traveling is really interesting and unique. I think you get definitely on the sort of a Bill and Ted vibe from this whole film. And you don't usually get comedies or like sci-fi films up for Oscars. So again, I think what's really great about this movie is what a breath of fresh air it is. They don't make movies with like big swings like this anymore, and they should because people obviously really wanted to see it. It was a massive success at the movie theaters. And critically and commercially and all that, and I'm sure home video it's going to do very well as well. So we just see, I hope the Daniels are able to continue the sort of role they're on of making these interesting, subversive, kind of absurdist films that have a really good heart at the center of them and like bring out these amazing performances of the people who are acting in them. And I hope all the actors in this as well get that little bump to their pedigree and are able to make some more sort of artsy or interesting films. And I really want to see that short round film sort of materialize. And I'm really glad that this character exists, that people can kind of point to and be like, you don't have to be this like bulldog alpha male. You can find other ways to navigate the world. There are other ways of like being a man in the world and like being masculine. It doesn't just have to be this one way. Like you can be caring and sympathetic. I thought that was a really great part of the film as well, and probably sort of biographical from the filmmakers, I had to assume. Okay, so yeah, if you haven't seen this film yet, forget everything I just said and definitely just go see it. I think you're going to be amazed. Don't go in with all this baggage about like, did it deserve to win the Oscars? Is it overrated? Blah, 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 blah. Just see it. And I think unless you don't have much of a sense of humor, then I think you'll probably like it and really appreciate all the same things that I just said that I saw in it. You will probably be able to see that as well. Okay, so this has been another episode of Positive Takes, and please like and subscribe and follow for more content.